Hello and welcome to another special episode of Unchained Hope and Healing from Addictions. We are so excited that you are joining us. We've been on a 10-day journey, an adventure really, where we've been listening to many different people share their story of struggle and ultimately recovery. If you're new to our program, just wanted to let you know that you can still watch the previous presentations, of course, and there's still time to register. I know it is our grand finale. Can't believe it's our grand finale. Time has flown. But if we want to encourage you to still register regardless, and the reason why is because you can be added to our group where we can continue to notify you of upcoming events. You could join, of course, the group of the possible lucky winners. Tonight may be your lucky night. And also, we want to provide resources to you um, so that you can follow up. Either you yourself are interested in following up on Unchained on a personal level, or maybe you want to help somebody else. Maybe you have a family member or a friend, and you want to be a conduit of a blessing. So, really, we want to encourage you to register. And the way to do that is by texting the name, the word Unchained to the following number, which is 903 666 4541. So text Unchained, just put that word, Unchained, to 903 666 4541. And the free giveaway that we have for the lucky winner is a book by Richie Halverson, who we've been listening to night after night. And the book is called Darkness Shall Not Overcome, and it is pretty much his personal journey to recovery from addictions. Also, we want to encourage you to tell us where you are watching us from. I know some are watching on Facebook and YouTube. Let us know where you're at, whether you're here locally in Florida or whether you're in some other part of the country. It's been pretty cool as we've been noticing that people have been watching us from all over, from the West Coast to the East Coast, even in Asia. That's been pretty cool. So we saw that we had one viewer in Asia. So we're curious to know where you're watching us from. Every evening, of course, we have a special guest that opens their hearts and shares with us their journey. And one of the things we've been saying night after night is that we're really presenting real people who faced real problems and ultimately experienced real victory. Our goal in this entire program is to convey the message that you are not alone and that hope is available to you or to any loved one that you're interested in aiding. This evening, we have Vanessa Morris here with us. Vanessa, we're so excited that you're here. And Vanessa, you're going to be sharing with us a little bit about Unchained from Repeating the Cycle. But before we get into all that, take us back to the beginning and share with us a little bit about what your upbringing was like.
Yeah, so first of all, so grateful to be here. I love this series and what you said, just being a conduit of hope for others. I think that as believers, that's what all of us want to do, right?
Amen.
We want to be a conduit of hope. So if I were to go back to the beginning, my story, wow, God has brought me so far. It really is miraculous. I was born to a mother who really didn't know how to be a mother. And so by the time she had me, she had given up children for adoption. She had had several abortions. She was involved in sex trafficking. She was highly addicted to many different substances, to drugs, to alcohol, in violent relationships, chronically homeless, and just a lot of brokenness.
Wow.
And so by the time she had me, she was just this shell of a person, didn't really know how to be a human anymore, just really in survival. And so how was she going to be a mother? And so I was brought up where, it would be okay for a short amount of time, but we know that unless you really get to the root of your issues, then they're all going to repeat, right?
Right.
So I really say to start to share my story, I have to share her story. So she was sexually abused as a little girl. She was the youngest of 5, and there was a lot of abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence in the house, but they were in church every time the doors were open.
Wow.
So as a little girl, she was getting this message of like, well, Jesus loves you, but then also hearing her dad be like, well, you better not tell anybody what's really happening, and then watching her mom wipe the blood off and go right back to church. And I think it gave her a lot of mixed messages.
Sure.
Because there were all these secrets. And so she had me, and it was like I was born into all these secrets. And, the system, as broken as we know the system is, I kept getting taken away. And so I was blessed enough to have believing family. So thank God for family that could step in on multiple occasions and put me in a place of safety where I was loved, and I was taken to church, and I was told that, God was with me, and I was in a safe place, but I kept getting put back with my biological parents. So it would be like this cycle of chaos and chaos and chaos and unknowing and feeling so alone and feeling so helpless and so unheard, and really watching her addiction constantly spiral as a
Right.
little kid, just watching that. And then I would get put into a really safe place with my family, but keep going back. And my mom was like, without even knowing it, I think grooming me to be a lot like her, to follow in her footsteps.
It's a lot of pressure for a child.
It was a lot, yeah.
And how did you cope with that? Because you feel, obviously you see your mother in pain, you want to help her, but
Right.
you're a child. How can you help her? There's a certain sense of helplessness, and I'm assuming also that you probably felt like you didn't really belong
Yeah.
in anywhere that you went, even though of course you felt a safe
Right.
haven with your faith-based extended family.
Yeah.
But it seems like you kind of
Yeah.
were floating in the air.
Like I became really good at fitting in, but I never felt like I belonged.
Wow. Wow.
Really good at fitting in, but never truly felt like I belonged, because obviously being with my mom and knowing, and my biological dad knowing, okay, well, these are my parents, so I'm supposed to feel safe here,
Sure.
right? And I'm sure that as many testimonies as you've had in this series, there might be a common thread even of anyone who has parents who are addicted or not present. No matter how messed up your parents are, you still want them to be your parents,
Of course.
right? Like, and love you and accept
Right,
you and all these
right.
things. So, but I also knew, like, that is not the life I want, and I can't stay in this. Like, there's something obviously not right.
Right.
So I don't fit in here, right? Or I don't belong here. And then I'd go to my family, who was loving and amazing and, poured into me. But I also knew, like, well, I don't really belong here. So I think how I coped was I internalized so much.
Wow. Bottled it in.
I
Bottled it in.
bottled it all in because I also learned from a young age that I couldn't feel safe letting it all out.
Wow.
I couldn't feel safe around my mom letting it all out, because she would just flat out tell me, like, you better shut up. Like, I never want to hear you, like, cry like that again. And so I didn't.
So at what point, Vanessa, did you explode? Because you could only do that for so long.
Yeah.
And how did that affect your adolescence? Because you're growing up as a child, but then you're getting into the teenage years, then you're becoming a person of age.
Yeah.
How did you kind of get control of the situation? And yeah, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I felt out of control is what. So anything I could get control in, whether it was different, like just OCD patterns that I would see, or anything that I felt like I could get a sense of control in, I would try. But my life felt like it was just spiraling, right? Because we were chronically homeless. I was couch surfing at any of my friends' houses who would let me stay there.
Wow.
Our life was a constant cycle of, just men coming in at all hours of the night, living in and out of hotels, watching my mom be abused and really passed around like a party favor.
Wow.
But I'm so grateful that I did have God-fearing, loving family, because whenever I was with them, they were taking me to God's house, and
Wow.
they were reading the word to me, and they were showing me unconditional love, teaching me how to pray. And so those seeds that they sowed, those saved my life.
Wow.
And even, when I felt totally out of control, I would hear a song I would hear a song or remember a verse, and it never left me, those little seeds. But when I became, oh gosh, I guess I was 14 years old, it's like you said, like something snapped. And I started feeling like, I had been labeled for so long, even in the midst of living in that chaos, like a good girl. And like, oh, you won't do it. Like you won't go to a party, you won't have a drink, you won't, be around, this group of people or these guys or, whatever that was. And so I was like, control. I'll do whatever I want. If I want to have that drink, I'll do it. And so at 14 years old, I got blackout drunk. I got in the back of a guy's car that I had no idea. I said, I have no idea who that guy was. I started, dressing a certain way and carrying myself a certain way and just, hanging around people that I knew were not going in the direction I wanted to go. And it's like that still small voice that never leaves us, right? I heard it being like, this is not who you are.
Wow. So you had these two forces.
Oh, constant.
You had the positive force from your extended family and the foundation that they
Yeah.
gave you. But then you had, of course, a very toxic force coming from your biological parents.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because at some point, you came to a crossroad, right? You had to either
Yeah.
make a definite decision as to what you were going to do. And it seems like, in your case, which I find it so interesting because in like we say, that addictions is not the same for everybody.
Right.
But it seems like addictions can also be something that affects bystanders at home, and then ultimately it could influence them either to go one way or go the other way.
Right.
So at what point did you make a conscious decision
Yeah.
of saying, you know what, I need to be careful, and I need to make sure that I make the necessary steps to become unchained,
Sure.
so that I don't repeat the cycle
Yeah.
of your
That's the
family.
road I was headed down. Like I was becoming, and I even remember thinking like, I hate alcoholism. Why am I doing this?
Wow.
Like I hate being looked at and felt like I'm an object for people. Like, why am I doing this? And it was because that's what I was being groomed to do, to repeat that cycle.
Right.
My mom would teach me like, well, this is how you get a man to, provide what you need, whether that's a hotel room for the night or a meal or whatever it might be. This is how you steal from a store or from, this is
Wow.
how you survive. This is what you do. This is how you get through life. And so I was being groomed to repeat that cycle, but then God. And so I'm 14 years old, and I had an opportunity to go to a youth camp, like a church camp. And I'm like barely hanging on to my faith at this point, right? Like the seeds have been sown, but I had been gone for a really long time away from my family who had invested all that faith in me. So I had an opportunity to go to a church camp, and I'm like, I don't know, like I don't know about like church camp. I don't know if I really fit in there, right? And so I go, and I get there, and all the kids knew the lingo, right? They knew the Christianese. They knew all the worship songs. They knew how to behave. They knew how to dress. I didn't know any of that. Like,
you felt like a foreigner. You're like, what am I
oh
doing here?
my gosh. And they looked at me like I was a foreigner,
Really?
right? Like, you were not allowed to say that here. And so I remember I'd go, and they'd have these grand altar calls, and it was obvious that there was something there, that it was real. Because you can't really get teenagers to fake it, right? Like, I love that about youth.
Right.
Like, if they're in it, they're in it. And so they'd just be like crying and at the altar and just worshiping, and I hadn't cried in years. Like that shut down. And I remember going to my bunk and just laying on the bed and being like, God, just make me want to want you. I'm not mad at you. I still believe in you, but it's not that I don't want you, it's that I feel nothing.
Wow.
I was so shut down because I was trying to get some semblance of safety.
Right.
I was like, just make me want to want you. And can I tell you, that fork, that crossroads, like, he invaded.
Wow.
And I knew I couldn't go back.
So that event at the youth camp
Mm,
was pivotal
absolutely.
in your trajectory,
Yeah.
and it seems like being put in a different environment
Yeah.
where there was, of course, peers.
Mhm.
Obviously they thought you were a foreigner and all that stuff, but you put yourself in a different environment,
Mhm.
and you put yourself in a different place where there was a different type of energy.
Oh, totally.
And because of that, it was pivotal in your walk. Now, tell us a little bit about what happened after that.
Yeah, because really, if I would have gone right back and lived in the same environment that I had, I don't, I mean, I wouldn't have stood a chance.
Hmm.
I was like this little girl, like trying to figure it out,
Right,
right?
right.
And just living surrounded by debauchery and brokenness and chaos and sin. And I had another aunt and uncle who were pastors, and they took a chance on me and said that I could come live with them.
Wow.
Which is crazy. Now looking back, I'm like, wow, they really heard the voice of God, right?
Yeah.
Because in their own flesh, who would do that,
You were
right? This
14.
messed up 14-year-old girl, like, sure, you can come live with us.
Wow.
And they said, they knew that God was saying a yes to that. And so my atmosphere totally changed.
Mm.
They did all this crazy stuff, right? Like take their kids to school. One year I had missed like 48 days of school. Nobody batted an eye.
Wow.
They're taking their kids to school. They're eating dinner together, going to church together, telling their kids that they love them. It totally freaked me out. It was so different than what I had lived in for those years. And I saw what life could be like.
Wow.
And they were so patient with me because I was so messed up.
Right.
But their patience with me and just showing me, that unconditional love, getting to reacquaint with all of my family that had sown into me for so long, and really like making me fall in love with the church again
Wow.
because I had missed it for so long.
I love that because, your story really highlights the fact that just because we're raised in a certain context, just because we may come from a questionable family tree per se, it doesn't have to dictate the course of our future.
100%.
It doesn't have to control us. And I love the fact that in your experience growing up, you had individuals that were committed to you. And I think what that shows is the fact that those, of course, we have a plethora of different types of viewers. We have people, of course,
Right.
that in the thick of addiction, and then we have others that are looking at addiction maybe from a different vantage point,
Sure.
that want to be an aid. And I think this is a powerful message to them that
Yeah.
you can be that conduit.
Yeah.
Your auntie and your uncle were that
Yeah.
conduit for you, and you were able to experience a powerful force of mentorship and guidance and orientation and leadership. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So at what point did you um, look at the situation of your mother
Mm.
and make basically identify
Mm.
as you are my biological mother, but this cycle is not going to repeat in my
Yeah.
life? Was it pretty much after you moved in with your auntie and your uncle?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a complicated one because I think even from infancy, I've heard just story after story of the neglect of my parents. And so from a very early age, it was pretty clear that they weren't able to be the parents they were meant to be.
Right.
But it wasn't until I was in college and I was still living at home with my aunt and uncle, and I was in college and I saw this movie Taken. Do you remember that movie?
Course,
Right?
of
So
course.
after that, I was like, I'm going to be Liam Neeson, right? I'm going to save everybody. And then God's like, sit down,
Right,
just
right,
give me
right,
a
right,
minute
right,
here,
right.
right? Let me just open your eyes a little more. I started doing some research, and that was a very Hollywood version of what sex trafficking is, but
Right.
I never identified my mom as a victim of sex trafficking.
Wow.
To me, growing up from the lens of a child, you talked about our audience coming from all different vantage points. From the vantage point of a child, my mom was an alcoholic. She was a drug addict. She was a criminal. All I did was go visit her in jail. She never took me to school. She was always with dangerous men in and out of our life. She locked me out of hotels while she was with another man inside of it. She didn't care. She didn't, all these different things. And that's all I saw her as.
Mm.
But when I started to learn about the trajectory and what is so textbook of what a sex trafficking victim looks like, and that root of childhood sexual abuse from a very, very early age
Right.
at the hands of someone that they should trust.
Right.
Later, also knowing she had compounded that with domestic violence in the home. And really, I think the faith also being a big part of what saved their life many times, but
Right.
also hearing that message while also keeping the secret
Right.
of what's going on behind closed doors can be very confusing for a
Sure.
child.
Sure.
So having those roots and then being introduced, learning that she was introduced from like her younger teenage year, 14. We talked about that being my crossroad. About 14 years old, she got introduced to drugs.
Wow.
And she was like, oh, I don't have to feel. Like, I can numb
I could
with
numb all
this.
this.
Yes. And so that pattern, and then she gets to me, right? So all of that leading up to, by the time she had me, of course that's all I could see her as. I didn't know all the backstory that
Wow.
could lead someone to
Wow.
that point.
So you saw your mother as a human.
Yeah.
You saw her for the first time, and you were able to look at the entire context.
Yes.
You saw the whole
It was
situation
so powerful.
where it was a journey into the chains of addiction, and just like it's a journey out of the chains of
Right,
addiction.
right.
Vanessa, in 30 seconds or so, if there's a viewer that's watching this and
Yeah.
maybe that can relate to you
Mm.
and has a family member that's in a similar situation, that's on the verge of giving up, which I'm sure you've probably experienced
Sure.
as well. What message can you give to that individual that seems like their family member, their friend, is a hopeless scenario, hopeless case? What message can you give to them?
No one is a hopeless case when God's involved.
Amen.
Never, ever stop interceding for that person. My mom passed away a few years ago. She was 51 years old,
Wow, so young.
but she got saved at the very end of her life. And I know and I believe with certainty that was God's grace to take her home at that time.
Hallelujah. And Vanessa, I would assume that had something to do with the changes she saw in you. And maybe that gave her hope. Say, wow, if my daughter can escape this, then maybe I can escape this.
Right.
So, Vanessa, don't go anywhere, because I have a ton of questions I want to ask you. The audience, of course, have a ton of questions they want to ask you. But when we come back, we're going to have a Q&A session with Vanessa. And if you have any questions, we want to encourage you to submit those. At this time, though, we're going to be listening to another powerful message from Richie Halverson entitled Living Unchained. So at this time, we're going to have a message from Richie.
Welcome to Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. We have reached the end of our series, but the real journey is just beginning. To live an unchained life, we've got to break through the denial with honesty. We've got to break through the hopelessness with hope, through the paralyzation with faith and action. We got to break through the fear with courage, the ego with humility, the shame with forgiveness, the same old thing with practicing a new thing. Selfishness must be broken by love. And the more we practice these breakthroughs in our daily life, the more free we will live. And that's what God wants you to have right now, freedom. Towards the end of John's gospel, there is this scene where Jesus is in Gethsemane praying. It's just before he goes to the cross. And it says, beginning with verse 4, "Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, 'Whom do you seek?' They answered him, 'Jesus of Nazareth.' Jesus said to them, 'I am he.' Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. And when Jesus said to them, 'I am he,' they drew back and fell to the ground. And so he asked them again, 'Whom do you seek?' And they said, 'Jesus of Nazareth.' Jesus answered, 'I told you that I am he. If you seek me, let these men go free.' And this was to fulfill the word that had been spoken, 'Of those whom you have given me, I have lost not one.'" In the beginning of the Bible, God searched a garden to save his children, but now his children search a garden in order to kill him. Adam hid in a garden, afraid of what would happen. Jesus came forward in a garden, and John 18:4 says, knowing all that would happen. It would be hard enough to die for someone with what little we know, but Jesus, knowing all that would happen, died. He knew all the lies that we've ever told. He knows all the thoughts we've ever had, knowing every selfish action, every drug addiction, all the pain and separation, the shame and humiliation, all the slaps and spit, every jot and tittle, knowing all that would happen, Jesus still came forward. You see, Jesus is everything that first Adam failed to be. Jesus said, I am he. If you seek me, let these go free. Now, what's interesting is as you study, the he isn't in the original language manuscripts. So what Jesus actually says is, I am. Now, at the burning bush, there's a story of Moses going to a burning bush, and Moses asks God for his name, and God says, I am. In John 8, Pharisees and scribes keep bringing up Abraham, and Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. He didn't say before Abraham existed, I was, which would have been amazing enough. He says before Abraham was, I am. Now that doesn't make any sense to us. I mean, that seems like a bad sentence unless it's in relation to God. You see, we never use the verb to be without an object. We say, I am this, or I am that, but God never does. There's no beginning to God. There's no ending to God. And there is no because to God. God's just like, I am. I don't need anything to justify my existence. My being doesn't depend on anyone or anything else. I am. The world loves to say that Jesus was a super nice guy. He was a great teacher. But this whole divine Son of God thing, I don't know. I just don't believe that. But this is the thing. Jesus never gives us that option. He never gives us that opportunity. You see, the Pharisees and scribes knew perfectly well who Jesus was claiming to be. And that's why they want to stone him. In John 10:33, it's not for good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you being a man make yourself to be God. And that means either Jesus was who he said he was, the divine Son of God, and we should listen to him, or he was a raving lunatic, in which case we need to forget about him. You see, either the gospel is absolutely false, and we should ignore it, or it's absolutely true, and we need to listen to it. But one thing we can't do with the gospel is just kind of have some mild, disinterested, well, Jesus was a good teacher. Either he's God or he's not. If you ask Jesus if he's God, right here, his answer is clear. He says, I am. And that's why everyone falls to the ground in this scene in Gethsemane. Now, what's interesting is this wasn't some random mob of people. It is a strong, organized army of experienced soldiers. But when Jesus says, I am, they all fall down. Now, the reason they fall down, first of all, this is basic physics. When a greater object comes into the proximity of a lesser object, the lesser object is always going to be shaken. It's going to be moved. If a 300-ton boulder fell through the roof and onto where I'm standing right now, I'm going to lose my footing. I'm going to be shaken. If you get into a fast current of water, you are going to lose your footing. If you're in a battle and your enemy is bigger and stronger and has a higher level, you're going to lose your footing and fall down. But not only is this in the nature of physics, this is the nature of humanity. This is human nature. You know, you thought you were smart, but then someone smarter comes along and, hey, suddenly you feel what? Dumb. You thought you were good looking, but then someone better looking comes along and now you feel what? Ugly. You thought you were strong, benching 200 pounds. Then a guy comes by and benches 400 pounds. You feel weak. You thought you were a good singer, but then an opera performer comes along and suddenly you're like, man, I can't sing at all. And that's just in the presence of human greatness. Wherever people encounter God in the Bible, they fall down. Ezekiel 1:28, such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, and when I saw it, I fell on my face. Elisha falls down, 2 Kings 2:12. He took hold of his clothes and he tore them in two. Paul falls down, Acts 9. Suddenly a light from heaven shone around him and falling to the ground. Isaiah falls down. Isaiah 6:5. Woe is me, for I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Over and over again, when people come into the presence of God, into the presence of greatness, they lose their footing. Romans 3:23 says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Maybe you've lived a life of mess ups and you feel like a mess up. Listen, everybody's messed up. Everybody falls short. Everybody struggles with addiction. It's funny, when I go around and I start talking to people about addiction, people will always say, well, I don't struggle with addiction. Addiction's not my problem. And I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, you don't think it's a problem. Everybody's addicted to something. Everybody is looking for value and significance and excitement from something, and it falls short. In life, we're always going to fall short. None of us can live a perfect life. None of us are strong enough. You know, my sinfulness is greater than my righteousness. My selfishness is usually greater than my selflessness. My debt is usually greater than my assets. I can't ever stay up. I never seem to measure up. I can't ever seem to step it up. But if that's our feeling, then we're not seeing Jesus for who he really is. Verse 3 says that this was a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards. A contingent of Roman soldiers was 10% of a legion. A legion was 4,000 to 6,000. So here we have 400 to 600 soldiers to 11 disciples. The disciples are completely outnumbered. They're totally overpowered. They are totally overwhelmed. And notice what Peter's reaction. Peter's reaction is even more ridiculous because of this. Notice John 18:10, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. You see, the moment Peter feels threatened, the moment Peter feels overwhelmed, he starts fighting. The second he's surrounded, he starts swinging. What do you do when you feel threatened? What do you do when you're surrounded? What do you do when you're overpowered and overwhelmed? Do you try and take on life's battles on your own? If so, you're like Peter. You're swinging a sword at 600 soldiers. You're fighting in your own strength. If you try to quit and break this chain on your own, you're like Peter. You're swinging at 600 battle-hardened soldiers. And friends, that swinging is going to wear you out. Either we fall down and surrender to a power greater than us, or we will fall down under the weight of our opposition, our problem. Is the power that you have stronger than your problem? When we treat God as he is, when we see him as he is, when we turn and surrender our life over to him, we're allowed to be who we really are. When I let God be who he is, it gives me the freedom to be who I am. I can finally stop pretending that everything depends on me. You know, I no longer have to be in control because I know someone stronger than me is in control. I don't have to atone for my sins because you see, he's paid for my sins. We don't have to prove our worth because you see, Calvary, Christ died in order to reclaim us. That's how much you're worth. We have nothing to fear if God is for us. Who can be against us? We're no longer the sum total of our accomplishments. We are the sum total of his accomplishments. So it doesn't matter if you went to Penn State or the state Penn. We all need God. And if you can see that, then you'll fall and you'll surrender. You see, worry and worship, they cannot coexist at the same time. You cannot worship and worry at the same time. In the secular worldview, it's survival of the fittest. It's eat or be eaten. Constantly proving yourself. You've got to constantly prove your value. I'm worth something. But in Christ, we no longer have to worry. Am I thin enough? Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? Am I wealthy enough? Am I good enough? Because in Christ, if you put your life in Him, He says, I am. I am. Richie, even though you're not going to ever be strong enough, good enough, fast enough, I am. And when you're in me, so are you. I once heard someone say prayer is taking yourself off the hook and putting God on the hook in your place. Every other religion says, do this to get to God. Only the gospel says, God did this to get to you. Every other founder of every other religion says, let me show you the truth. Jesus says, I am the truth. Here, let me show you. Jesus didn't come to help you find your way to God. Jesus says, I am the way that God has come to find you. We're not strong enough. We're not big enough, powerful enough, but we have a God who is, who comes after us. You see, the Bible is not a book about how to find God. The Bible is one long love story about how God came to find us. 1 John 4:19, He loved us first. Never forget that. God does not love you because you do this or that or because you live a really good life. God loves you because He loves you. He loved you first. Only after we see how much we are loved will we ever be able to love. You see, real surrender releases you from the weight of the worry. I am He, so if you seek me, let these go free. At first, Peter looks strong, but before long, he's going to fall. He's going to fail. In just a few hours, in John 18:17, this woman asks Peter, you're not one of those man's disciples, are you? No, he said, I'm not. Peter was acting strong, but he wasn't strong. There's a lot of people who act strong, but they're not strong. Peter found out, you know what? I'm not strong enough. I'm not powerful enough. I'm not good enough. But the good news is Jesus says, I am. In John 18:8, Jesus confesses who He is in order to save His disciples. I am. But in John 18:17, Peter denies who he is in order to save himself. He says, I am not one of His disciples. So Jesus is I am for Peter's I am not. You see, wherever we fall short, Jesus fulfills. Where we stumble, Jesus stands. Whatever you're not, Jesus makes up for. You see, whenever, like Peter, we are not, Jesus says, yeah, but I am. I am He, so take me and let these go free. Me for them for me. Friends, that's the story, that's the narrative of the Bible. In Exodus, God tells Moses to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. God wants to let you go through this series. And then He says, tell him, I am sent you. Now here at the brink of a much better, bigger Exodus, we have Jesus saying the same thing. I am, now let my people go free. Verse 9 says, this was to fulfill the word that He had spoken, of those whom you gave me, I have lost not one. Jesus never lost you. In every bad decision you make and all the wreckage of your life, Jesus never lost you. Jesus has actually allowed Himself to get put into our chains so that He can break your chains right now. God was taken captive so that we can be set free. Jesus remains silent at His trial so that He can speak up at your trial. By not defending Himself, He became our greatest defense. His condemnation is the price of our liberation. The freedom Adam and Eve lost in the garden, Jesus restores in a garden. What the first Adam failed to do with the tree, the second Adam accomplishes up on the tree. Peter's denial is washed away by Christ's profession. Peter's failure has been fulfilled by Christ. Where Peter fell short, Christ has now finished. Christ's I am has blotted out Peter's I am not. You see, no amount of pain will stop Him from loving you. No amount of stupidity will stop Him from saving me. So when the enemy whispers you're not good enough, when addiction tells you you'll always be an addict, remember Jesus. Jesus' I am makes up for everything that you're not. So fall down. Fall down and surrender. Either we fall down and surrender to something stronger than us, or we will fall down under the weight of everything that's weighing on us. God is the only one who can fulfill you, and when you fail, forgive you. Don't let this series end without making a decision. Let God set you free right now. You can't free yourself. You're like Peter trying to fight off 600 battle-hardened soldiers. You can't do it. You're not strong enough. The great I Am has to come in where you are not. You can't free yourself, but He can free you. In fact, all we have to do is submit to the freeing process. And we've been learning this throughout this entire series. You're not alone. There are people that are living unchained lives right now, right in your own area. People who can help you. In fact, if you would like someone to reach out to you and help you start in this process of living an unchained life, I want you to text the word unchained to the number on your screen. You see, the only wrong way to recover is to try to do it by ourselves. So if you're ready to take your freedom to the next level, text unchained to the number on your screen. Stop letting the chains of life hold you back. Stop letting the chains of addiction hold you back. The day God set me free was the greatest day of my life. And you know, after that day, He had a whole lot of other chains to set free. And He had to set me free first from the dope. And then He had to set me free from the cigarettes. And then He had to set me free from the anger. And then He had to set me free from the shame. And then He had to set me free. But really, all those things were just symptoms. Jesus had to set me free from me. If you want to begin this process, let's start working on what we've learned. Because you see, it works when we work it. Until you work it, you'll continue doing the same thing you've always done, and you'll keep getting what you've always got. Christ paid for everything. Receive His freedom. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
Thank you, Richie, for that powerful message of living an unchained life. If you're just joining us, Vanessa here shared us powerful personal journey of Unchained, and she is a testimony. She's living proof that living an unchained life is very much possible, as she shared with us a little bit about her upbringing. So, Vanessa, we have a couple questions here that I wanted to ask you. Of course, there's a gazillion of them that we will, but we don't have the time to get into all of them. But here's some. One question is, you speak about the importance of breaking generational cycles within the family. Why is this something you are so passionate about? And I'm assuming it has to do with your personal story, of course.
Yeah, of course. I am so passionate about breaking those cycles because many times I don't think people necessarily think that it's possible. And I have seen and am living proof that it is possible, that you don't have to repeat the cycle, that addictions and what they're rooted in, that doesn't have to be your story. It may have started there. That's not where it has to continue. So being the daughter of a victim of sex trafficking, someone who was addicted to alcohol, to drugs, to sex, to sin, who was eaten up by shame, and everything in her whole life had been rooted in secrets and covering up, she was grooming me to very much walk in that same path. And when Jesus entered my life, because of people saying yes to Him and being willing to take a chance on a teenage girl who really, on paper, it looked really unwise to take a chance on me, but they did. They stepped in and they interrupted that cycle, and because of that, I don't have to repeat it. So I'm super passionate about that, and I want people to see that can be your story too.
Wow. And I love that, Vanessa, because it seems like because you are a product of that yourself, it influences the way that you treat people that are currently in chains. I know a lot of times there's a sense of rejection, right, to certain types of people or certain classes of people. But because you've seen the humanity behind that, It tells a lot about the work that you're involved with, which we're going to get into here in a minute. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But what are some of the most impactful ways to break the cycles of addiction, abuse, exploitation for the next generation? What would you say on that?
Yeah, some of the greatest and most powerful tools, I think, are things that I saw happen in my life. And one of those is the power of godly mentorship, of being someone who is willing to step in no matter what that, whether it's a teenager, a young man, a young woman, being able to step in and say, you know what, I'm just going to be here. I'm going to let you know that you're known, you're seen, you're known by God, you're seen by God, you're loved by God. And even though you're carrying all these symptoms and all of these things that have happened in your life, I'm going to be here for you and I'm going to pour into you. That mentorship, that just being there was pivotal in my life. And when you pair that with the church and the church being willing to wrap around someone even when they don't look like the church, right? I think especially when they don't, when they look all messed up and they're carrying all their suitcases and all their baggage into the church, right? That's the most powerful thing. When you empower someone with wrapping around them, whether you're, we talked about my testimony. I had biological family that stepped in, but you don't have to be biological family. You can step in and be someone's spiritual mom or spiritual aunt or spiritual sister, or spiritual father or uncle, and hold that place for them. And then when you pair that with the church just being actually accepting, and they're like, wow, you mean I can really show up with all my stuff and I don't have to have all the verses memorized and all the hymns memorized and all, I don't have to have the Jesus fish on my car to come here? That is so powerful.
Sure. So that's interesting. So even though, some of our viewers probably, of course, were moved by your story, they were inspired by your story, and some of them probably thought, wow, Vanessa's been through some stuff that I haven't been through, and I find myself in addictions. But some may say, well, she had that uncle.
Right.
She had that auntie.
Right.
She had that extended family member that was a little bit of a light. And I think you pretty much already answered this question, but if you want to add to that, because what would you say to that person that's like, what an incredible story, but I don't have that auntie, I don't have that uncle, and maybe they're not connected to any individuals that are of that kind of a healthy mentorship.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person that maybe feels like they wish they had that extended family member that you mentioned?
Yeah, I recognize 100% that I was incredibly blessed and privileged to have that, because that saved my life. I mean, God used those people instrumentally in my life. But I would say, find your people.
Right.
And I would challenge those listening who want to be that conduit for hope, be those people. And take a risk on someone, because when you take a risk in the name of Jesus, it's a risk that is going to pay off in spiritual and kingdom dividends ongoing.
Right.
Maybe you don't have that family member. Maybe it's your family members who, have really propelled this ongoing cycle in your life. It doesn't have to be that way. You were created for community, and the church is not perfect.
Right.
And if you're basing your faith in God on the church and on people, they're going to fail you.
Sure.
But when you finally are able to connect with those people in the community of Christ who really are saying, you know what, I'm flawed, but I'm going to grab your hand and pull you up here, and we're going to get you safe. We're going to get you help. We're going to be here when you fall back down to pick you back up.
Nice.
That's the solution. That's what we need.
And I love that, Vanessa, because even people that may not have family members or whatnot or connections to a local church, that's why we're doing this series, to expose the fact that there are resources, there are people, there are systems, there's organizations that are in place to be an aid. And not to get ahead of myself, but if you can give us, our viewers, maybe a website.
Yeah.
I know we're going to get into the organization you work with, but is there a way that our viewers can get in contact with you? Is there an email? Is there a website that you would recommend for them?
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing there, but the website and the email that I would share is thefoundationunited.org and info@thefoundationunited.org.
Thank you. So, segueing into
Yeah.
into the powerful stuff that you guys are into. So, tell us a little bit about Real Talk and what makes Real Talk unique and impactful for the church, particularly as a
Yeah.
whole, especially when it comes to this idea that you were talking about breaking the cycle and the church being involved in that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, Real Talk is the solution to that. It is the missing link, I believe. I truly believe it. Because for so long we have done church and we have worn a mask, right? And we've come to, the scheduled services and maybe we've gone to our Bible studies or we've been real comfortable in our pews or, whatever that might look like.
Right.
But we're missing out on the real talk. The reason we have to have Unchained as a series and have it be this whole production is because it's actually like, wow, we're going there in the church.
Right.
You mean we're actually going to have these conversations? And people are hungry for real talk. So what we've done is we have created through the Foundation United, like I said, that's where you can learn more about this program. But we have created a program specifically for the church to help them go there. It is for kindergarten through top leaders so that we can protect our children. Right. There's a curriculum for kindergarten up through 12th grade, right? These curriculum for our next generation. But also for our young adults, our men, our women, our leaders to learn how to have these real authentic conversations about things like addiction, about things like sexual abuse, about what the repetition of that same cycle has looked like in your family, the trauma that you've been through. How do we actually have these conversations as believers and then get next steps so that we don't have to repeat them? Wow. That's what Real Talk is able to accomplish.
I love that. I love that. Now you mentioned children in there, and I'm a father of 3 kids.
Right.
One question that came in is, what you mentioned the involvement of the church, which I love. Where do parents fit in with protecting their own kids from going down the path of exploitation? And of course, you shared your story about having an absent mother that was leading you to the wrong.
Right.
So how does a parent? What's the parent's role in the process of breaking the cycle?
Yeah, I think the parent's role is pivotal. And one of the reasons why we've seen the same broken cycles repeated so many times is because the parents haven't got their own healing, and so we're seeing it repeated generation after generation, right?
Wow.
But for these parents who are like, you know what, enough's enough. Like, the time is up, like the jig is up. We want to interrupt the cycle. We don't want to see our kids go down that path. We want to know what the red flags are. We want to know how to protect the next generation. Real Talk actually provides a parent training specifically.
Wow.
So we have a training that can go into the church, that can reach parents, that can equip them so that they know, okay, these are the signs to look for. These are how to have these hard conversations with our children or with our teenagers. These are the apps to look out for. These are, different tactics that we might see a predator approaching our child with, and how to have open eyes even in the church, even on the sports team, even at the school. We want to equip everywhere. We want to equip kids to speak up and parents to be that shield of protection.
And I like what you said, because a lot of times as parents we want to, protect our kids, we want to fix our kids.
Right.
But I like what you said, that a lot of times we just perpetuate unresolved issues in our own hearts as parents. So I like the fact that for a parent that's viewing and they're like, well, what do I do? Well, you could probably start addressing the issues in your life that have been a generational thing that maybe has been unaddressed. By you addressing it, you yourself experiencing Unchained is part of the way that your children are going to be like, wow, my mom and dad are flourishing. So I love that. Now, as far as the work that you do, of course, but how does being a part of Real Talk impacted your life personally? I know that you deal with a plethora of different types of people in the church, people out of the church. How has that impacted your life?
Jay,
where do you start, right?
I gotta be honest. It is like the culmination of every part of my life put into one. I believe that it is the answer to even unspoken prayers for the church, because the church wants to do better.
Wow.
And we need to do better. But for me, I've been the daughter of a prostitute, and I've been a PK. I've been a pastor's kid too. And I shared that trajectory. I've been on both sides of the spectrum, right? And I have longed growing up to hear these conversations happen in a setting where I could really feel safe and protected and be my authentic self and bring all my mess and feel just completely wrapped in love and acceptance and, be able to have those next steps. And Real Talk does that for kids who are just like me. So now to be able to bring that, my greatest hope and passion in the world is to see the church rise up.
Nice.
Because sex trafficking, addiction, abuse, secrets, shame, all of that is symptomatic. If we can just get to the root and get to the heart and have Real Talk that has, God's hand and fingerprints on it, we're going to solve all the other stuff.
Wow. Wow. I love it. I love it. Vanessa, I can't thank you enough for being on our program. And what a fitting way of bringing our grand finale. I can't believe it's over.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad.
Don't have to
But
repeat the cycle.
yeah, we're gonna have to repeat that. We're gonna have to repeat that. But I like the fact that we're ending on the note that the cycle can be broken.
Yeah,
That the chains of repetition doesn't have to continue.
exactly.
That there is hope. That it doesn't matter where you come from. Vanessa is prime example of that. And Vanessa, one more time, if you could give our viewers the website
Yeah.
and the email,
Yeah.
just so that they're aware that there's help.
Okay, so the website is thefoundationunited.org, and the email is info@thefoundationunited.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being with us.
Thank you.
We need to announce the lucky winner of the book by Richie Halverson, which is, of course, Darkness Shall Not Overcome. And we have the lucky winner. And I always ask for a drum roll, even though we don't have drums here. But thank you, Vanessa. Appreciate that. And the winner is Virginia Hagen. I think I said her name right. Hagen. So, Virginia, congratulations. You're the lucky winner. We're going to make sure that we get that copy of that book to you, and we pray that it is a blessing to you. We have reached the end of Unchained as a program, but not as an experience. Unchained continues. In fact, I have a special announcement that I want to make, and that is we've been blessed listening to Richie night after night. We've been blessed, of course, listening to his personal journey and really just the way he's able to bring out very practical principles for those on the road to recovery. We are going to have Richie Halverson here in the local area in person, and it's going to be November 5 to 12. And the entire program is called Darkness Shall Not Overcome. He's going to share his story, and we're actually going to invite all of our interviewees. So, Vanessa, you're invited.
All right.
And we're going to invite everybody else if you want to meet all the interviewees. Of course, you have questions. Maybe you're in the local area and you can do that. We want to encourage you. Mark your calendars now, November 5 to 12. And, of course, if you're registered, Unchained, 903-666-4541. And if you're on the email list, of course, you will get notification. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to send us a message on Facebook or on YouTube or on the comment section. And help is available, and we want to make that available to you. So thank you so much for joining us on this 10-day journey, and we look forward to seeing you on another special experience of Unchained. God bless.